The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Ambassador Zethkalar stood at the center of the vast circular room, his forearms trembling slightly as he held the small data crystal. Around him, representatives from over 400 different species waited in their floating pods, their various breathing apparatus and environmental suits, creating a soft humming that usually filled the air with comfortable noise. Today that sound seemed loud and harsh. "The human response has arrived," Zethkalar announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation system. Every species heard his words in their own language, but the meaning was the same for all of them. After 3 months of waiting, humanity had finally answered their invitation to join the galactic community. Council Prime Velthari leaned forward in her elevated seat. Her blue skin shimmered under the chamber's lights, and her large eyes focused intently on the ambassador. She had been leading the council for over 50 years, and in all that time, no species had kept them waiting so long for such a simple response. "Please share their message with the council," she said formally. Zethkalar activated the crystal. A holographic image appeared in the center of the chamber, showing a middle-aged human woman with gray hair and tired eyes. She wore a simple dark blue uniform with no fancy decorations or symbols of rank. Behind her was a plain white wall with nothing else visible. The woman looked directly at the camera and spoke in clear, simple words. "I am Director Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Administration. We have received your invitation to join the Galactic Council and accept your terms for membership. After careful consideration by our various governments and colonial councils, we must decline your offer. We appreciate your interest in establishing relations, but we prefer to handle our own affairs. We will continue to respect the space of other species and expect the same courtesy in return. Thank you for your time. Consider this our final word on the matter." The message ended. The hologram disappeared. The chamber remained silent for several long seconds. Then the noise began. Hundreds of different voices started talking at once in dozens of languages. The translation system struggled to keep up as shocked representatives demanded explanations, voiced outrage, and expressed disbelief. Never in the 3,000-year history of the Galactic Council had any species simply refused to join. "Silence," Velthari commanded, her voice booming through the chamber's speakers. Slowly, the noise died down. "Ambassador Zethkalar, please explain how this is possible. Did the humans understand our offer?" The ambassador's skin had turned a pale green color, showing his nervousness. "Prime Velthari, I delivered the standard invitation package personally to their colony on Kepler 442b. I explained the benefits of council membership, the protection we offer, the trade opportunities, and the advanced technology sharing. I also made clear the consequences of remaining outside our community." And their response? The colonial governor, a human named Rodriguez, listened politely. He asked several questions about our trade agreements, military obligations, and voting procedures. He seemed to understand everything perfectly. Then he said they would need time to discuss it with their other colonies and governments. Representative Thexmore, the military coordinator for the council, spoke up from his pod. His insect-like features twitched with agitation. "You mentioned consequences. Did you explain what happens to species that refuse to join our community?" "Of course," Zethkalar replied. "I outlined the standard protocols. Economic isolation, restricted access to trade routes, limited access to council-protected space, and increased scrutiny of their activities." The governor seemed to understand but showed no concern. This caused another wave of shocked murmuring throughout the chamber. Economic isolation had always been enough to bring reluctant species into line. The benefits of council membership were so obvious that most species begged to join long before they were invited. Velthari activated her personal console and began reviewing data. "How many human colonies are there currently?" "Intelligence estimates between 60 and 80 settled worlds," replied Thexmore. "They started expanding into space about 200 years ago, but their growth has been faster than expected for such a young species." "And their technology level?" "Primitive by our standards, but adequate for basic space travel. They use fusion drives, basic shielding, and simple weapons. Nothing that should concern us militarily." "Then why?" Velthari asked slowly. "Do they think they can survive without our protection and trade benefits?" No one had an answer. Council Economic Advisor Rickstahl floated forward in his water-filled pod. His tentacles moved in patterns that the translation system interpreted as urgent concern. "Prime Velthari, I have been monitoring human trade activities since we first made contact. Their behavior is unusual. Explain. They seem to have established trade relationships with several non-council species in the Outer Rim territories, the Zelanti merchants, the Corvin mining guilds, even some of the independent stations in the Vale Nebula. None of these groups have proper council authorization for such activities. This news created an even bigger stir in the chamber. For over 1,000 years, the council had carefully controlled galactic trade through a complex system of permits, sanctions, and regulations. Species that wanted to trade had to go through council-approved channels and pay the appropriate fees and taxes. Are you saying, Velthari asked carefully, that humans are conducting unauthorized trade? Not exactly unauthorized, Rixdal replied. Technically, since they are not council members, they are not bound by our trade regulations. But the species they are trading with are violating their agreements with us. And what are they trading? This is where it becomes concerning. Human technology appears to be more advanced than our initial assessment suggested. They are providing improved mining equipment to the Corvins, better life support systems to the independent stations, and enhanced fusion cores to several species. The Zelanti are particularly enthusiastic about human medical supplies. Velthari felt a cold sensation in her stomach. The Council's power came from controlling technology and trade. If humans were providing alternatives to Council-controlled resources, it could undermine their entire system. How is this possible? She demanded. Our intelligence reports clearly stated that human technology was primitive. Thexmore's insect features twitched nervously. Our assessments were based on their early space exploration vessels and the ships they used to establish their first colonies. It appears their technology has improved significantly since then. Or, added another representative, they were never as primitive as we thought. The implications of this statement hung in the air like a dark cloud. The Council's expansion had always followed the same pattern. They would contact a new spacefaring species, demonstrate their superior technology and vast resources, offer the benefits of membership, and then apply pressure if necessary. The carrot and stick approach had worked for 3,000 years, but humans seemed immune to both the carrot and the stick. Prime Velthari, said Representative Quintar from the Outer Rim territories. I have received reports from my sector that several council member species are asking about establishing direct trade relationships with human colonies. They claim human prices are more competitive and their trade terms more flexible than our standard agreements. The chamber erupted in shocked voices once again. The idea that council member species would prefer to trade with non-members was unprecedented and deeply troubling. Velthari raised her hand for silence. This situation requires immediate attention. I am calling for an emergency session of the Inner Council. We need to understand exactly what we are dealing with and how to respond appropriately. As the general session ended and representatives began leaving the chamber, small groups formed to discuss this unexpected development. Some expressed anger at human arrogance. Others wondered if there was something they had missed about this new species. A few quietly asked whether the Council's traditional methods might need to be reconsidered. In her private office after the session, Velthari stared out at the stars visible through her window. In all her years of service, she had never encountered a situation like this. Every species eventually recognized the benefits of joining the galactic community. Economic pressure always worked, because no single species could compete with the combined resources of 400 civilizations. But humans seemed to be doing exactly that. And if the reports were accurate, they were not just surviving outside the council system, they were thriving. She activated her personal communicator and sent a priority message to the intelligence division. She needed more information about human capabilities, their trade relationships, and their real technology level. The brief message they had received suggested that humans understood exactly what they were refusing and were confident in their decision. That confidence worried her more than any threat or insult could have. For the first time in her long career, Velthari wondered if the Galactic Council had finally encountered a species that simply did not need them. And if that was true, what did it mean for the future of galactic civilization? The humans had said this was their final word on the matter, but Velthari suspected that this was just the beginning of. The intelligence briefing room in the council headquarters was much smaller than the main chamber, but the tension was just as thick. Prime Velthari sat at the head of a curved table, surrounded by the most senior members of the Inner Council. Before them, Chief Intelligence Analyst Mordek projected a series of holographic displays showing data, charts, and images from human space. The situation is far more complex than we initially understood, Mordek began. his mechanical voice translator giving equal emphasis to each word. His species communicated through chemical signals, but the device made him understandable to others. Our assumptions about human civilization have been fundamentally incorrect. Military Coordinator Thexmore leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the blue light from the displays. Explain what you mean by fundamentally incorrect. Mordek activated a new display showing a three-dimensional map of human-controlled space. Red dots marked human colonies, while green lines showed trade routes and yellow indicators represented known military installations. First, their political structure. We have been operating under the assumption that humans have a unified government that we could negotiate with or pressure. This is false. Humans appear to operate under what they call a federal colonial system, with multiple independent governments working together loosely. Economic advisor Rixdahl's tentacles moved in agitated patterns. How many governments are we talking about? At least 17 separate colonial administrations, 3 major corporate entities that function as governments, and several independent settlements that answer to no higher authority. Yet somehow they coordinate their activities when necessary. Velthari studied the display. This makes no sense. How can a species expand into space without centralized control? How do they manage resources, coordinate defense, or maintain order? That is precisely what makes them so difficult to understand, Mordek replied. They seem to thrive on what we would consider chaos. Each colony operates independently, making its own decisions about trade, defense, and expansion. But when faced with external threats or opportunities, they coordinate their responses quickly and effectively. The analyst activated another display showing human ship designs. Second, their technology. Our initial assessments were based on their early exploration vessels, which were indeed primitive by our standards. However, human technology appears to improve at an exponential rate rather than the steady progression we see in most species. Thexmore studied the ship schematics with growing concern. These designs violate several principles we consider fundamental. Look at this fusion drive configuration. It should not be possible to achieve those efficiency levels with their material science. Yet their ships regularly achieve performance that exceeds our theoretical models, Mordek confirmed. More concerning, their civilian vessels are heavily armed by galactic standards. What they call merchant ships carry weapons that would classify them as light cruisers in most council fleets. Representative Yulsen from the Science Division spoke up. Have we determined how they achieved these advances so quickly? This leads to our third major discovery, Mordek said, activating a new set of displays. Human research and development does not follow standard patterns. Instead of the careful, systematic approach used by most species, humans appear to take enormous risks with experimental technology. The displays showed images of human research stations, some clearly damaged or destroyed. They test new technologies at full scale rather than running computer simulations. They accept failure rates that would be considered catastrophic by our standards. But this approach allows them to make breakthrough discoveries much faster than theoretical research would permit. That is insanely dangerous, Yulsen protested. The risks of destabilizing new technology without proper testing could destroy entire systems. Yet it works for them, Mordek replied simply. Their technological advancement in the past 50 years exceeds what most species achieve in 500 years. Velthari felt a growing sense of unease. What about their social structure? How do they maintain stability with such a chaotic system? This is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of human civilization, Mordek said, his tone becoming even more flat and mechanical. They do not maintain stability in any sense that we understand. Human societies are in constant flux, with individuals changing roles, locations, and even fundamental beliefs throughout their lives. The analyst showed images of human cities and settlements. They have no rigid caste systems, no hereditary leadership positions, and no fixed social hierarchies. Individuals can rise from the lowest positions to leadership roles based on ability, luck, or simply personal ambition. This should result in chaos and conflict, but it does not? Velthari asked. Surprisingly, no. While humans do have conflicts and disagreements, they seem capable of resolving them without destroying their social structures. They adapt rather than break. Economic advisor Rixdahl's tentacles moved in what the translation system interpreted as deep confusion. This contradicts everything we know about stable civilization. How do they maintain order without clear hierarchies? They use what they call democratic processes, combined with individual initiative, Mordek explained. Instead of having decisions made by qualified authorities, they often vote on important matters or allow individuals to make choices based on local conditions. The silence in the room was profound. Every council member species had evolved sophisticated social hierarchies that provided stability and order. The idea of allowing unqualified individuals to make important decisions was terrifying to them. Thexmore broke the silence. What about their military capabilities? Surely they cannot coordinate effective defense without proper command structures. Mordek activated displays showing human defensive installations and fleet movements. Their military follows the same chaotic patterns as the rest of their society. Individual commanders have enormous freedom to make tactical decisions. Their strategies change constantly based on local conditions rather than following established doctrine. That should make them easy to defeat, Thexmore said, but his tone suggested doubt. Theory would suggest that, yes. However, our intelligence-gathering efforts have encountered unexpected difficulties. Velthari raised an eyebrow. What kind of difficulties? Human societies are extremely difficult to infiltrate or analyze using standard methods. Our agents are trained to navigate complex political hierarchies, understand formal power structures, and identify key decision-makers. Human societies have none of these features in recognizable forms. The analyst showed images of bustling human settlements. Power and influence shift constantly among individuals based on circumstances rather than fixed positions. Important decisions might be made by someone we would consider low-ranking, while official leaders often defer to others with relevant expertise. Our agents find themselves lost in a web of informal relationships, temporary alliances, and constantly changing responsibilities. Several have reported complete mission failure because they could not identify who actually held authority in various situations. Representative Quintar from the Outer Rim spoke up. What about economic pressure? Have the trade sanctions had any effect? Rickstill answered this question directly. The trade sanctions have been completely ineffective. In fact, human trade activity has increased since we implemented them. How is that possible? They have established alternative trade networks with non-council species and independent groups. More troubling, several council member species have been quietly establishing direct trade relationships with human colonies, bypassing our standard commercial regulations. Velthari felt a chill. Which species? The Zelanti Merchants Guild was first, attracted by human medical technology that appears to be more effective than council standard treatments. The Corvin Mining Consortium followed, seeking human industrial equipment. Several Outer Rim colonies have begun trading raw materials for human manufactured goods, and they prefer human trade to council trade because human trade terms are simpler, more flexible, and often more profitable for our member species. They do not require the extensive documentation, approval processes, and fee structures that our system demands. The room fell silent again as the implications sank in. The Council's control over galactic trade was based on the assumption that they offered the only viable alternative to primitive local economies. If humans could provide competitive goods and services without the bureaucratic overhead, it threatened the entire foundation of Council power. Velthari stood and walked to the window overlooking the Council complex. The massive structures represented thousands of years of careful development and expansion. Every building, every system, every procedure was designed to maintain the stability and order that kept galactic civilization functioning. But humans seemed to achieve the same results through methods that should not work. They expanded without central planning, developed technology without proper oversight, and maintained order without stable hierarchies. It was like watching someone build a house by throwing materials into the air and having them land in perfect formation. What is your assessment? She asked without turning around. Of the long-term implications of human expansion? Mordek paused before answering. If current trends continue, human influence will spread throughout the Out. The emergency session of the Inner Council had been going for 6 hours, and tempers were starting to show. Prime Velthari watched as her most trusted advisors argued over the human problem with increasing frustration. Outside the conference room windows, the lights of the council complex twinkled in the artificial night cycle. But inside, the mood was anything but peaceful. We have been talking in circles, Military Coordinator Thexmore declared, his insect features clicking with agitation. The humans have rejected our authority and are undermining our influence. This requires a military response. Economic Advisor Rickstall's tentacles writhed in disagreement. Military action without clear provocation would damage our reputation with member species. Many already question the necessity of our trade regulations. Our reputation will not matter if the entire Outer Rim declares independence. Thexmore shot back. The humans have shown that council membership is optional. If we do not act decisively, others will follow their example. Representative Quintar from the Outer Rim territories nodded reluctantly. Thexmore is correct about the growing sentiment in my sector. 3 more species have formally requested reviews of their trade agreements in the past month. They cite human trade terms as more favorable alternatives. Velthari had heard enough debate. The situation was deteriorating faster than anyone had predicted. Human influence was spreading not through conquest or aggression, but through simple economic competition and technological innovation. It was a threat the Council had never faced before and was not equipped to handle through traditional means. "What do you propose, Coordinator Thexmore?" she asked formally. Thexmore activated a tactical display showing the human colony of New Geneva, located in a relatively isolated system about 40 light-years from the nearest Council territory. A limited military action. A small fleet to blockade this system and demonstrate that ignoring Council authority has consequences. He highlighted the colony's position and trade routes. New Geneva is economically important to the humans but militarily isolated. A blockade would disrupt their trade networks while minimizing the risk of escalation. The humans would be forced to negotiate or watch their colonial economy collapse. "And if they refuse to negotiate?" Velthari asked. "Then we maintain the blockade until they do." No species can survive economic isolation indefinitely. Chief Intelligence Analyst Mordek spoke up from his position at the table. "I must point out that our intelligence suggests humans do not respond to pressure in predictable ways. They may view a blockade as an act of war rather than a diplomatic tool. Let them," Thexmore replied confidently. "Their technology is advanced for their age, but they are still a single species with limited resources. We represent 400 civilizations with thousands of years of military experience." Economic advisor Riksdal's tentacles moved in patterns indicating deep concern. A military confrontation could destabilize the entire Outer Rim. Many species there have established profitable relationships with human colonies. "Which is exactly why we need to act now," Thexmore insisted. "Every day we delay, human influence grows stronger. A swift, decisive action will remind everyone that the Council maintains order in this galaxy." Velthari considered the proposal. The logic was sound according to traditional Council methods. A show of force had always been effective in bringing reluctant species into line. The blockade would be limited in scope but clear in its message. The Council would not tolerate challenges to its authority. "What assets would you require for this operation?" she asked. "A squadron of 12 heavy cruisers and appropriate support vessels. Enough to establish an effective blockade but not so large as to appear overtly aggressive. The fleet would take position around New Geneva and announce the blockade for violations of galactic trade regulations." "Violations?" Quintar asked. "The humans are not Council members. They are not bound by our trade regulations. They are encouraging Council member species to violate their agreements with us," Thexmore explained. "That makes them accomplices to treaty violations. It provides legal justification for our action." Velthari nodded slowly. The legal reasoning was thin, but it would serve. More importantly, it would demonstrate Council resolve to species that might be considering following the human example. "Very well," she decided. "Authorization is granted for Operation Stable Order. You will take a fleet to New Geneva and establish a blockade. The humans will be given an opportunity to negotiate compliance with Council authority. If they refuse, the blockade will remain in place until they reconsider." Thexmore's features expressed satisfaction. "I will have the fleet ready within 48 hours. Make sure your commanders understand the importance of restraint," Velthari warned. "This is a demonstration of authority, not a conquest. We want the humans to negotiate, not fight." "Of course, Prime Velthari. The fleet will use minimal necessary force to maintain the blockade. If the humans attempt to break through, they will be turned back but not destroyed unless they pose a direct threat." As the meeting ended and the others left to prepare for the operation, Velthari remained in the conference room with Chief Analyst Mordek. She had learned to value his opinions, even when they were uncomfortable to hear. "You have concerns about this operation," she said. It was not a question. "I do," Mordek confirmed. "Our intelligence on human military capabilities is limited. We know they have advanced civilian technology. but we have not observed their military forces in action. Surely you do not think they could threaten a council fleet? I think humans consistently exceed our expectations in unexpected ways. Military Coordinator Thexmore is approaching this as a standard diplomatic pressure operation. But humans may not respond according to standard patterns. Belthari walked to the window overlooking the council complex. What do you think they will do? Unknown. But I recommend having contingency plans ready in case the operation does not proceed as expected. 3 days later, the council fleet arrived at New Geneva. Military Coordinator Thexmore commanded from the heavy cruiser, Dominant Peace, a massive vessel that dwarfed anything in the human system. His confidence was high as the fleet took position around the colony world and its orbital installations. The blockade announcement was broadcast on all frequencies. By authority of the Galactic Council, this system is now under economic blockade for violations of galactic trade regulations. All vessels attempting to enter or leave this system will be turned back until local authorities agree to negotiate compliance with Council oversight. The human response came within 2 hours. Governor Martinez of New Geneva appeared on the communication channel, wearing the same simple uniform style that seemed common among human officials. Behind him, Thexmore could see what appeared to be a busy command center with humans working at various stations. Council Fleet, this is Governor Martinez. You are in violation of human territorial space and are ordered to withdraw immediately. New Geneva has committed no violations of any legitimate authority and will not submit to illegal blockade. Thexmore replied with formal diplomatic language. Governor Martinez, the Galactic Council seeks only to discuss compliance with established galactic trade regulations. We are prepared to negotiate reasonable terms for ending this blockade. There is nothing to negotiate, Martinez replied firmly. Human colonies operate under human law in human space. We do not recognize Council authority over our internal affairs. You have 1 hour to withdraw your fleet before we consider this an act of war. The transmission ended. Thexmore stared at the blank screen with growing irritation. The human governor had shown no concern about facing a fleet that could destroy his entire colony. Either he was bluffing, or humans were even more stubborn than intelligence reports suggested. Maintain blockade positions, he ordered his fleet. Monitor all vessels attempting to enter or leave the system. The first test came 6 hours later, when a human cargo ship approached from the outer system. The vessel appeared to be a standard merchant freighter, but as it closed with the blockade line, Thexmore noticed it was moving faster than civilian ships should be capable of. Unidentified cargo vessel. You are ordered to halt and prepare for inspection, the Council fleet transmitted. The human ship's response was immediate and unexpected. Instead of stopping or turning away, it accelerated directly toward the blockade line while broadcasting a simple message. Human vessel determination, exercising right of free passage in human space. Stand aside. Thexmore watched in disbelief as the cargo ship approached his heavy cruiser at attack speed. Warning shots, he ordered. Turn that vessel around. The Council ships fired energy beams designed to disable the cargo ship's engines, but instead of stopping, the human vessel somehow absorbed or deflected the shots while continuing its course. Worse, it was now broadcasting a new message that reached far beyond the immediate area. This is Captain Rodriguez of the merchant vessel Determination. We are under attack by Council forces in human territorial space. All human vessels are advised that the Galactic Council has declared war on humanity through unprovoked military action. War? Thexmore exclaimed. We fired warning shots at a blockade RR rim territories within. The news of the disaster at New Geneva spread through the galaxy faster than the Council could control it. In her private office, Prime Belthari watched the reports with growing horror as the carefully constructed image of Council authority crumbled. Before her eyes, the tactical display showed the aftermath of what military historians would later call the 8-hour war. Military Coordinator. Thexmore's fleet had been completely outmatched by human forces that seemed to appear from nowhere. 12 heavy cruisers, the pride of the Council Navy, had been reduced to drifting hulks within hours of the first human counterattack. How many survivors? Belthari asked quietly. Chief Medical Officer Yulhan checked his reports. Approximately 60% of the fleet personnel. The humans stopped their attack once our ships were disabled and actually provided medical assistance to damaged vessels. They helped our wounded? Yes, Prime Belthari. Human medical ships arrived on scene within hours and offered aid to any Council personnel who required it. Many of our crew members owe their lives to human medical technology. Velthari stared at the tactical display, trying to understand what had happened. The humans had destroyed a council fleet, then immediately provided humanitarian assistance to the survivors. It was not the behavior of the aggressive conquering species, but it was also not the behavior of a species that could be intimidated or controlled. What about Coordinator Thexmore? Alive but in human custody. He was taken aboard the human flagship when his ship was disabled. Reports indicate he is being treated well but is refusing to answer questions about Council military capabilities. Chief Intelligence Analyst Mordek entered the office carrying a data tablet filled with new reports. His mechanical translator gave his words the same flat emphasis as always, but Velthari had learned to read the subtle signs of distress in his chemical signal patterns. Prime Velthari, the situation is deteriorating rapidly beyond the immediate military defeat. Explain. News of the human victory has reached every sector of the galaxy. 17 Council member species have formally requested emergency sessions to discuss their membership terms. 4 Outer Rim colonies have declared independence from Council oversight. The Zelanti Merchants Guild has announced they are establishing permanent trade relations with human colonies. Velthari felt a cold sensation spreading through her body. How is this possible? It has been less than 48 hours since the engagement at New Geneva. Human communication networks are more extensive than we realized. They have been broadcasting detailed accounts of the battle, including tactical recordings that show Council ships being outmaneuvered by what appear to be civilian vessels. Mordek activated his tablet, projecting holographic footage from the battle. Velthari watched in shock as massive Council heavy cruisers were systematically disabled by smaller human ships that moved with impossible speed and agility. Our intelligence assessment of human military capabilities was completely wrong, Mordek continued. What we thought were civilian cargo ships were actually heavily armed warships disguised to look harmless. Their weapons technology exceeds our most advanced systems by a significant margin. How did we miss this? Because we were looking for military installations and fleets based on our own organizational patterns. Humans integrate their military capabilities into their civilian infrastructure in ways that made them invisible to our intelligence methods. The analyst showed images of human colonies and space stations. Every human settlement is also a fortress. Every cargo ship is also a potential warship. Every mining operation is also a weapons production facility. They have created a military-industrial complex that is distributed across their entire civilization. Velthari studied the images with growing amazement. This level of militarization should have been obvious to our surveillance. It would have been if they organized their forces according to standard patterns. But human military doctrine appears to be based on principles we have never encountered before. Representative Quintar from the Outer Rim territories arrived carrying reports from his sector. His expression showed the strain of the past 2 days as he approached Velthari's desk. Prime Velthari, I have urgent reports from 12 systems in my sector. The situation is becoming critical. What kind of reports? Independence movements are spreading faster than we can respond to them. The Corvin Mining Consortium has announced they are withdrawing from Council oversight and establishing direct relationships with human colonies. 3 agricultural worlds have declared themselves neutral territories outside Council jurisdiction. Even some of our most loyal member species are questioning the effectiveness of Council protection. Velthari activated her personal display showing the galactic political map. Red indicators mark systems where Council authority was being challenged, and the pattern was spreading outward from human space like an infection. What are their specific complaints? They cite the human model as proof that advanced civilization is possible without Council oversight. They point to human trade terms as more favorable than Council regulations. Most damaging, they question whether Council military protection is worth the cost after seeing our fleet defeated so decisively. Economic advisor Riksdahl entered the office, his tentacles moving in patterns that indicated extreme agitation. Prime Velthari, we have a financial crisis developing. Now what? Trade revenues are down 18% across all sectors. Species that were required to use Council-approved trade routes are switching to independent channels, many of them involving human intermediaries. The economic foundation of our government is under direct threat. Velthari looked around her office at the advisors who had helped maintain galactic stability for decades. All of them looked confused and frightened by developments that should not have been possible. What do the humans want? She asked. What are their demands for ending this crisis? Mordek consulted his tablet. According to their public statements, they want nothing from us. Nothing. They have made no demands for territory, resources, or political concessions. Their public position is that they simply want to be left alone to manage their own affairs. They have stated that any species is welcome to trade with them on mutually beneficial terms, but they will not force anyone to do so. That makes no sense, Quintar protested. If they wanted independence, why did they mobilize such a massive military response? Why are they encouraging rebellion in council territories? According to human public statements, they mobilized their fleet in response to what they considered an unprovoked attack on their territory. They claim they have no interest in encouraging rebellion and are simply offering alternatives to species that request them. Velthari walked to her window overlooking the council complex. The massive structures had been built to impress visitors with the power and stability of galactic civilization. Now they seemed like monuments to an outdated way of thinking. Have the humans made any attempt to contact us since the battle? Several, Mordek replied. They have offered to return Coordinator Thexmore and the other prisoners unconditionally. They have also offered medical assistance to any council personnel who were injured in the engagement. Most recently, they have suggested that representatives from both sides meet to discuss ways to prevent future conflicts. They want to negotiate? Not exactly. They are offering to discuss practical matters like prisoner exchange, medical assistance, and avoiding accidental conflicts. But they have made it clear that they will not negotiate about council authority over human affairs. Velthari considered this information. The humans were offering to treat the council as equals rather than superior authorities. It was not submission, but it was not hostility either. They seemed genuinely interested in avoiding conflict while maintaining their independence. What do our military advisors recommend? That depends on which advisors you ask, Mordek replied carefully. Some recommend immediate mobilization of our full fleet for a massive assault on human space. Others suggest that such an action would be extremely costly and might provoke even stronger responses from human forces. And the political advisors? They are divided between those who want to maintain council authority at all costs and those who think we need to adapt to the new situation. Representative Quintar spoke up. Prime Velthari, I have been in contact with several of the Outer Rim governments that are considering independence. Many of them have indicated they would be willing to remain in the council if we reformed our trade policies and military requirements. Reformed how? More flexible trade agreements, reduced oversight requirements, and greater autonomy for member species. Basically, they want the benefits of council membership without the restrictions. Economic advisor Rixidal's tentacles moved in patterns indicating deep thought. Such reforms would fundamentally change the nature of the council. We would become a voluntary association rather than a governing authority. Is that necessarily bad? Quintar asked. The human model seems to work effectively with voluntary cooperation. The human model works for humans, Rixidal replied. We do not know if it would work for other species. Velthari turned back to face her advisors. What would happen if we attempted to negotiate with the humans as equals rather than as subjects? The question hung in the air for several long moments. Finally, Mordek answered, Unknown. No council leader has ever attempted 6 months after the Battle of New Geneva. Prime Velthari stood in the same chamber where the human message had first been delivered. But everything had changed. The vast circular room that once held representatives from over 400 species now contained barely half that number. Empty floating pods marked the absence of worlds that had declared independence or simply stopped participating in council sessions. The remaining representatives whispered among themselves in small groups. Their conversations filled with uncertainty about the future. The translation system still hummed softly, but the comfortable sounds of galactic cooperation had been replaced by the nervous energy of a civilization in transition. The quarterly reports, Chief Economic Advisor Rixidal announced, his tentacles moving in patterns that had become familiar over the past months. Every report brought more evidence that the old order was crumbling. Trade revenues are down 62% from the same period last year, he continued. 47 star systems have formally withdrawn from council trade agreements. Independent trade networks now handle approximately 30% of all galactic commerce, most of it coordinated through human intermediaries. Representative Quintar, now speaking for what remained of the Outer Rim territories, added his own sobering statistics. 12 more systems have declared independence this month. 3 have applied to join the Human Colonial Cooperative, and 6 have established direct defense agreements with human forces. The Human Colonial Cooperative had emerged as an alternative to council membership, offering the benefits of interstellar coordination without the requirements of political submission. Any species could join simply by agreeing to principles of voluntary cooperation and mutual defense. No fees, no complex bureaucracy, no surrender of sovereignty. It was everything the council was not, and it was growing rapidly. Chief Intelligence Analyst Mordek activated displays showing the current political map of the galaxy. The solid blue areas representing council-controlled space had shrunk dramatically, replaced by a patchwork of independent systems, cooperative territories, and neutral zones. The rate of change continues to accelerate, he reported. Human influence now extends across 40% of the galaxy, not through conquest but through voluntary association and economic partnership. Prime Velthari studied the displays with a mixture of amazement and resignation. The humans had kept their word about not forcing anyone to join their alternative system. They simply offered better terms than the council and let species choose for themselves. Most chose the human model. What about our core territories? She asked. Stable but under increasing pressure, Mordek replied. Many of our oldest member species are requesting discussions about reforming their membership agreements. They want to remain in the council but with greater autonomy and more favorable trade terms. Similar to what the humans offer? Yes, the irony was not lost on anyone in the chamber. The council was being forced to reform itself to compete with a species that had refused to join their system in the first place. Economic advisor Riksdahl activated new displays showing trade flow patterns. The economic implications are clear. Species that have adopted the human cooperative model show increased prosperity, technological advancement, and political stability. Our remaining member species are demanding to know why council membership cannot provide the same benefits. Representative Yulson from the Science Division spoke up. Our technology advancement has also slowed significantly. Human research sharing agreements have accelerated. Scientific progress in cooperative territories, beyond anything we can match. Through our traditional methods because they share research freely instead of controlling it through licensing agreements, Quintar added. Innovation happens faster when scientists can collaborate without bureaucratic oversight. Velthari had heard similar reports for months. The human approach of open cooperation consistently outperformed the council's system of controlled hierarchy. It was a lesson that challenged everything she had believed about effective governance. Has there been any word from the delegation? She asked. 3 months earlier, she had authorized a diplomatic mission to human space, not to negotiate council authority over human affairs, but to discuss practical matters of coexistence and to understand how their system actually worked. Ambassador Zeth Kalar reports that the discussions have been productive, Mordek replied. The humans have been remarkably open about sharing information regarding their governmental and economic structures. And their system is even more complex and chaotic than we originally thought. But it works because they have developed social and technological mechanisms for managing that complexity. The analyst showed displays of human governmental structures. They do not have a single decision-making authority because they do not need one. Most decisions are made at local levels by people who understand local conditions. Coordination happens through voluntary communication networks and mutual agreements. It should not work, Representative Yulson protested. Complex decisions require expertise and careful analysis. The humans achieve that through what they call distributed expertise, Mordek explained. Instead of centralizing all knowledge in a single authority, they distribute decision-making to people with relevant knowledge and experience. And this is more effective than our system? According to their results, yes. Human colonies adapt quickly to changing conditions, innovate constantly, and maintain high levels of productivity and satisfaction. Velthari considered this information. What does Ambassador Zeth Kalar recommend? He suggests that we consider fundamental reforms to council structure and operations, not to copy the human system, but to incorporate principles that have proven effective, such as greater autonomy for member species, voluntary rather than mandatory participation in council programs, open trade policies, and shared rather than controlled technology development. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Such reforms would transform the council from a governing authority into something more like the human colonial cooperative. It would mean abandoning 3,000 years of tradition and accepting that voluntary cooperation might be more effective than imposed order. Representative Quintar broke the silence. Prima Velthari, I have been authorized by the remaining Outer Rim territories to make a formal proposal. Proceed. We propose that the Council adopt a new charter based on voluntary cooperation rather than hierarchical authority. Member species would maintain full sovereignty while cooperating on matters of mutual interest. Trade would be conducted through open agreements rather than regulated monopolies. Technology would be shared freely rather than controlled through licensing. You are proposing that we become more like the humans, Velthari observed. We are proposing that we adapt to reality, Quintar replied. The galaxy has changed. Species now have alternatives to Council membership. We can either change with them or become irrelevant. Economic advisor Rickstahl's tentacles moved in patterns indicating deep consideration. Such changes would reduce our revenues significantly, at least initially, but they might stop the exodus of member species, Quintar pointed out. And they might encourage some independent systems to rejoin the Council under better terms. Chief Intelligence Analyst Mordek activated a new display showing long-term projections. Analysis suggests that the reformed Council model could eventually become more prosperous than our current system. Voluntary cooperation appears to generate more wealth and innovation than enforced compliance. Velthari studied the projections with growing interest. The reformed Council would be smaller in terms of direct authority, but it might be more influential in terms of actual cooperation and shared prosperity. What about military considerations? She asked. How do we maintain security without central authority? The human model uses distributed defense networks, Mordek explained. Individual systems maintain their own defensive capabilities, while coordinating through mutual assistance agreements. When threatened, they can mobilize collective responses quickly and effectively, as we learned at New Geneva. Yes, their distributed military model proved more effective than our centralized fleet. Structure. Velthari walked to the chamber's windows, looking out at the Council complex that had been the center of galactic civilization for millennia. The buildings still stood proud and impressive, but they no longer represented the only path to advanced civilization. If we implement these reforms, she said slowly, we would be admitting that our traditional methods were inferior to human alternatives. We would be admitting that we are capable of learning and adapting, Quintar replied. The humans have shown us a better way. It would be foolish to ignore their lessons because of pride. And if we do nothing, the Council continues to decline until it becomes irrelevant, Mordek stated flatly. Current trends suggest we will lose another 30% of our membership within 2 years if nothing changes. Velthari returned to her seat and looked around the chamber at the representatives who remained. They represented species that had built galactic civilization through centuries of careful cooperation and mutual support.